The Department of Education in KwaZulu-Natal defined its vision in the context of schools, because we impact positively at a schooling level. So we had to frame our vision around the school as a center, because the head office is just a support level. District has support level, and so are seconds. Where things happen is at the school level, where teaching and learning is taking place is in the school. So we had to recognize that in framing of our vision. So we then said our vision would be to have our schools as innovative hubs for quality teaching and learning that produces learners developed to exploit opportunities for lifelong learning or success. So our schools should be innovative hubs for quality teaching and learning. And this teaching and learning should be able to produce learners that are developed to exploit opportunities of the future. So our schools are not just when this vision demands that our schools should not just be walls, a teacher and learners in a classroom, but they should be innovative hub in a true sense for quality teaching and learning for all. We're emphasizing for all because of our history as South Africa, where we all know that quality education and investment in education was exclusively for a white population. It's a reality, it's a historical fact. Schools in township areas and in rural areas where you find most of our African learners were not just neglected, but they were underdeveloped, deliberately underdeveloped. So that the standard of education is so skewed in favor of South Africans of white color, and these ones, Africans in particular, only had to receive the standard of education that was going to make them useful laborers of those who are white in complexion. That's a historical fact. Now, a government of the people must therefore be able to intervene on behalf of the majority who were underdeveloped and dispossessed. That is why probably some of you will have noticed that we spend most of our time in rural and township areas, where we're making investments over the past years. You will find us in rural and township areas because our view is that learners in African, in townships and rural areas must receive the same standard and quality of education like their peers in private schools and in urban areas. Learners in townships and in rural areas whose parents can't afford to pay for this expensive education, they must still get it because the government is intervening on their behalf. So that is our orientation and our direction as a Department of Education. Now, this function shift therefore has to fit in this vision and in this strategic direction that I have just described. So our centers for ECD centers must equally be these innovative hubs in a true sense. Since yesterday, an argument has been made that it is better to prepare a child right from the foundation. If you really want to have kids excelling at matric, you can't focus on them only when they're in matric. You must start at ECD level. So that by the time they get to matric, you don't spend millions and millions on intervention programs. A kid must get into a matric so as to be comfortable with no pass and pass with flying colors, because they will have been better prepared at an ECD phase. And I was saying to to Mr. Zobo, the HOD, I want to ingane even the ECD and foundation, we want to get I want to do money, go down there, put your parents. That is our vision. So that these kids, simply because their parents could afford, we must give the quality ECD to those even who cannot afford. So that is why this function must then fit into this vision, and these centers should be innovative hubs, so that we start ingane from ECD, sikwazi we track right up to the exit point of the schooling system. Now this will demand a number of things to change. This will demand a number of things to change. Firstly, the quality of our cities, ECD centers must change. And I think now, there is a reality here. And we have been arguing with Mamvila as HOD, not DST. When we started this function shift, I was saying, when you go to townships in the main, every corner is an ECD center. Every corner. Now, we must be able to say, are those centers fit for purpose? And we must confront that question. Because as ECDs move from, as this function is integrated to Department of Education, at the center of it is education of the child. Because that's our mandate, is the education of the child. Our mandate is not to grow businesses. That's not our mandate. Our mandate is quality teaching for these kids. When we provide nutrition in schools, the NSNP, they call it feeding scheme. When we provide it, our primary mandate and interest is not a business person who's providing. Our primary interest is that our kids must eat at school every day. That's our primary interest. Then the businessman who supplies us to too. That is why we become intolerant to those who fail to supply food in our schools. We don't negotiate, we terminate. You fail to supply, we terminate you. Because our interest is not really to, our primary interest is about teaching and learning. So feeding scheme, as they say, the NSNP, is designed to make sure that there is no learner who goes to class on an empty stomach, such that learner is unable to focus and then the performance is affected. That is why we're giving them food. So business on this mandate, we're not going to be tolerant to you. When we provide sanitary towels for young girls, free sanitary towels, because we provide free sanitary towels for young girls, our interest is not about the person necessarily who's supplying. Our interest is to make sure that the girl learners don't miss school because they are responding to nature. That's our interest. Because when they miss school, then their performance is affected. So we must protect them. That when they are responding to nature, they must not miss the schooling day. Therefore, we're giving them free sanitary. When we provide scholar transport, it's not because we want to create businesses for those who are transporting learners. It's because we want our learners to come to school, to arrive in school fresh, so that they can concentrate, go home, still able to do other work when they're at home. Ngoba uma uhamba amabanga amade ufika esikoleni ukhathele ekuseni. awukwazi ukuconcentrate ntambama ubuyele ekhaya ufika wenza ama-household chores uhambe otheza wenza ukuthi ubukhathela usakwazi ukwenza umsebenzi wesikole. The next thing you fail at the end of the year. So that is why I'm emphasizing that ours as Department of Education is this teaching and learning. Now, when we're discussing with the I raised the concern that probably the proliferation of these ECD centers, particularly at the backyards of Omakelo and Award, they are probably informed by two things in the main: is business, but secondly, abazali abafuna ukuthi bashiye ingane bahambe bamsebenzini babuye bayilanda ntambama. Now things will have to change. Things will have to change because I'm sure it will remind me, there is a CAPS curriculum for ECD. There's a CAPS. So these centers will not be centers for English, which is Yolanda. And for us to accredit centers, they will have to meet our standards. Beyond the transitional period, they will have to meet these standards. We will not, going forward, accredit a center in it's not gonna happen like that. So centers that will be accredited, like schools. There is no school that is accredited without a curriculum. Where there is an independent school, which we're not funding as government, some were even subsidizing, but all of them, they register with us and they must offer proper curriculum, accredited curriculum. And as these centers come to DPE, they will have to be subjected to that. And it then also speaks to the issue that we'll have to deal with of practitioners themselves. I'm saying to you, the HOD is confirming this. There is a CAPS curriculum for ECD. Now, it will mean at a particular point, ECD practitioners must have a particular defined level of qualification. That's what it means. Because who did not go far in schooling, as a practitioner, but who as a CAPS curriculum, you won't understand that. And therefore these kids will not benefit anything from me. So there must be a level of minimum qualification so that these learners really get to start getting proper education at an ECD level. I'm sure we are all parents, probably. I'm sure even Mkungebe is a parent. Probably all of us are parents. And we all want our kids to get better education. We all want our kids to get better education. So this better education must be given by qualified people to do that. It's like in other fields. You can't be a doctor when you don't have qualification. You can't practice as a doctor. You can't practice as a lawyer if you don't have a law degree. So equally, education must be for those who are qualified. Because ultimately, education is a fulcrum of development. Education, even engineers, everyone except but everyone who is successful in life because of careers, whether we're scientists or what, so we must get education right. And the aim of moving this function to education is to make sure that we streamline education, so that we're able to produce necessary skills and all of that are necessary for the economic development of our country. Our economy is not developing as others, which I also agree, probably because we don't have necessary skills to develop the economy. At times, there's skills mismatch. You know, when we were having an engagement with the Chinese, and I like to make this example, they were saying to us, the reason why they could build a 1,000 bed hospital in 10 days in the fight against COVID-19 was because they have engineers angatwalisa 11 Moses Mabhida stadiums as China, engineers. So to fill in bongo engineer labase China, bangatwala lezi stadiums zase Moses Mabhida zu-11. In South Africa, we are bad. Kuba West ke bosufuna laba bakithi abanethakazela. Now we do want to change that. So for the economy to develop, you need proper skills. Now, as we go forward beyond the transitional phase, this question must be resolved of the qualification of the practitioners, of the standard of the centers that we are going to be driving. And I know it will bring about the question of remuneration. I strongly believe that indeed people must be remunerated according to their qualification and qualification. That's what I believe. It's a principle which I think nobody must differ with. In terms of a debate because of the realities. Do we have sufficient funds and all of those things? We're a country that is financially depressed. But we must not default the principle. People must be remunerated based on the work that they do and their qualification. That's the principle which none of us must dispute. I got a treasure, I was and all of those things. Because that's the reality. When MEC Dube was delivering the budget speech, she says Department of Education, 57 billion. There's a round of applause. And then social media and the media people getting a lion's share of the budget, 57 billion. What are you going to do with this 57 billion? Now, we are saying 90% of that, which is how much, but 90% of this 57 billion go to the salaries of the people who are currently in the system. I think it's 49 billion or so. Yeah, somewhere it's 48 billion or so. Of this 57, it goes to the salaries of the current staff establishment. Then you are left with about 10 million or so, billion or so. Other billions go to schools through norms and standards. We have 6,000 schools in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. We have to give them money for norms and standards. Singakakhandi ikole ezintsha, singaka-renovate ikole esezindala, ezinye ey'bulawe ama-storms and all of those things. So by the time we have 57 billion, there are a number of things that we have not catered for. So those are the realities that we must appreciate. But we must not differ on principle in terms of proper remuneration for the work as well as the qualifications. You know, I'm sure some of you will know KZN is the biggest system in the country. And if things go wrong in KZN, the whole country will collapse. If things go wrong. That's why we can't afford to get things wrong. You know, some people will say, KZN, anqash waqash. Tell us a province that has 90,000 educators except KwaZulu-Natal. 90,000 educators in the system. There's no other province that has that. You know, but we understand the issue of unemployment is a problem that affects all of us. Now, I thought, colleagues, I needed to raise those issues that there are fundamental principles which we must agree on, and there are realities that we must face, because ultimately our client is a learner. Our client is a learner that must get proper education. The last point that I want to engage on is that we as parents, we must take active interest in the education of these learners. Now that the function shift is with us, or with us from the first, there must be no parents or dumping. You know, the problem that we have in society, which we must collectively fight against, is that in society manje ithatha zonke inkinga enayo iphonse ezikoleni. Ingane yami misbehavior kanti othisha bafundisana. Umzali akayibuzi ukuthi ingane yami ihlupha kuphi. Ungakube ngiyikhulisa ngendlela efanayo. Othisha bafundisana. Ingane ikhuleliswa umakhelwane benza ngatothisha. Yabo. Ingane ziza nama-drugs ey'koleni aqhamuke emphakathini yethu bapha ntothisha. Nobody asked ukuthi senzeni umphakathi ukudila nama-drugs and dangerous weapons from our schools. These kids spend most of the time with their parents or in the communities. There are few hours that must spend in school. So we must not allow ourselves to our responsibilities way to swap on the equally. Because if we do that, we burden the educators who are supposed to be focusing on teaching and learning. Because the time that we have in schools is for teaching and learning. The other things we must take care of them as parents in society. It becomes worse over the school. Because kusho njengoba sesinama ECD centers, usuzokuthola kunabazali abafike bovala ECD center. It's into lobona ukuthi noma ngakuthupe iminsango yakho you understand. How does a parent who loves his or her kid oyifisela nje ukuthi iphumelele bese uvalesa ngolesikole athi ngeke ifunde ingane yami until inqashele kathisha? Ngabona manje kunesikole ngapha eMgundlovu bazivalile izolo, but specifically basho bafuna othisha abangaki. There were 2 posts HOD. Those posts were filled over through surplus educators, but abazali bathi cha sibafuna labo othisha bamasabebe malethile nabi sibafuna laba bo2 bavala isikole kwangafuni. And we took a simple decision. Okay, principal, tell all the educators to go home. We'll tell them when to come back. And 2 were not going to meet those parents until they decide about the future of their kids. Because these kids, uhulumeni uyasilekelela for i-future yazo, but izalwa ithini. Now I imagine sengivuke kusenje nami ngiyovala isikole sengane yami, ngivale ngithi ayizofunda ngoba ngifuna uthisha umqungebe, angimfuni uNgcobo. Hayi ukuthi uNgcobo uyayifelisa nje ingane, hayi. ziyaphasa ukuthi mhlawumbe hayi ngimsolo ngokuthi uyathakatha noma kunjani so angisamfuni uNgcobo sengifuna uNgobese and ukuze ngithole ngofuna ngivala isikole. Now the moment you close isango lengane esikoleni uvalela isango le-future yengane yakho. So we want to invite you to stand on the side of the children. Uma kuneyinkinga ngoba there will be problems. There will be teething problems. But let's sit down and deal with those problems. There shouldn't be an amount of a challenge that necessitate or justify for our score. There shouldn't be. Who else can over if I'm a preference? Now what education thing no no baby come to abavale ngoba kuthi ama toilet ayawa ayingozi engane in this case abiya Department of Education abonza ngalutho. Then let's go and deal with that. But not to die if you are no teacher, not this one. As some full principal, therefore self-finance value score. We can't agree to that. So these centers must not also be subjected to that. These centers. So we must protect them as parents. We must protect them. But there is still a lot of work that we need to do in the transitional phase. Umhlaka wani akubona isiqalo nesiphetho. It's an official day yokuthi ke ayike sending ngaphansi komnyango education. But there are a number of things that we still have to do, as I was saying, the infrastructure, the type of education that is offered in those ECT centers, the qualifications, and the resources that we deploy to these education centers, including their accreditation. Is it sustainable that mobilize omakhelwane and then I'm going to get funding and then say is that sustainable? Does it help in all of those things? One of the issues, the last one, I know I've taken them, but when we talk about issues, ngoba ngiyazi azozikhatha ukuya phambili. Azozikhatha ukuya phambili. So ngcono ngiwasho manje khona ngizosho ngakuwashilo and then sifumela kusodila kanjani nawo. You have ECD centers, for example, whose practitioners are seasoned parents, if I might use that word, at the age of 70s and so forth. Seasoned parents. Now, we have laws in government that regulates retirement. Now, how then do we balance those things? Ngitangisho impela singathi masesibuzana bese nithi hayi mina nathi ayihamba kahle. Yonke into ikahle. We must deal with that question. Because there is law on the other side, there is a reality on the other side. How then do we marry the two? So that these are the types of the ECT centers that we want. Thank you so much, Program.